Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. I'm extremely excited about today's guest. He's an international influencer and contributor to the world of education, specifically to the K-12 system, has done some absolutely remarkable things and has just an amazing story about his level of service. I could go on, but I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Stephen Peters. How are you, sir?
I'm great.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks for having me this morning.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell the viewers who may not be familiar with you, I know that's just a small segment of the population, about what you do, what you're currently doing as it relates to education. And I know you have your hands in a couple different pots, but we want to focus on your current role, and then let's also delve into your commitment to the world of literacy.
Yes. So I'm a sitting superintendent now, running a school district in South Carolina, but also serving as vice president of the International Literacy Association. We service 61 countries, 330,000 members and affiliates globally, and just last year launched Children's Rights to Read to stamp out illiteracy in the world. I'm a living example of what literacy does. Oftentimes people confuse literacy with just reading in the singular fashion. We believe that literacy is about understanding the world and those around you, being able to communicate and live in the fashion of that. We had a great time yesterday engaging with ASU students, and I walked away just totally impressed with their level of maturity and focus and the engagement of what they are doing now and how it relates to what they want to do later. So that was a great experience, and ILA is grateful. We had our executive director here. We were talking about what's hot in the literacy world and research and so forth. But the professors here, Department of Education, planned the day so well.
Great.
And we were able to have intimate conversations about education and their role in it. One of the takeaways yesterday, I think, for them was the problems that we face in public education today in America won't be solved by my generation. They'll be solved by their generation. And I saw a few people sit up straight on that saying, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Sure.
So ASU is a great HBCU, and part of my presidential platform for ILA when I take office July 1st is to launch 5 partnerships with literacy centers with HBCUs around the United States of America.
Outstanding.
And because you all have probably the best provost at any HBCU, that's Dr. Angela Peters, who just happens to be my wife.
I know. Not biased at all. I love it. Yes.
So ASU was a logical choice for us to begin that quest.
Yes. Well, I echo your sentiment. She is absolutely outstanding and came here, hit the ground running, and just in a short period of time, I think it was in a meeting with her last week, and she said that she's still under 6 months. And I'm like, it feels like you've been here for 2 or 3 years because she's done so much work. So we are certainly privileged and honored to have her. Before we delve a little bit more into the whole literacy piece, let's learn a little bit about your educational background and what led to you, your current role as superintendent, and then your involvement with literacy. Yeah,
we had a question I did yesterday from one of the students in terms of pathway, and was it conventional, and mine was not. My dream and aspiration was to be a professional basketball player. I was received a full scholarship to Hampton University, where I played basketball in college, and did not make it to the NBA. My teammate did, I didn't. I often tease that God has a sense of humor, because his dream and aspiration was to be a high school principal. Mine was to be an NBA basketball player.
Well,
he went that route, I went this.
The other.
But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I ended up teaching in the inner city and found that that I had success with students that other teachers didn't. And I started studying and researching the why. It was a natural tenet for me to capture, inspire, and then receive permission to teach. And I think in our education world, we have it backwards. We try to teach first with no relationship. And so I went through the channels of classroom teacher, assistant principal, director of secondary education, and now a sitting superintendent. But prior to my superintendency, I consulted for 13 years. I traveled the world helping struggling school districts and schools, school boards, superintendents, principals to kind of right the ship, to alleviate the achievement gaps in the apparent genders, systems, races, socioeconomic background, channels, and so forth. And we had success at that, but I felt that I lost credibility because when I was a principal, cell phones weren't even rampant in our classrooms, and social media was not the #1 influence on school-age children in America. So I decided I was going to go back on the front lines of education. I went back into running one of the toughest high schools in the state of South Carolina, OW, affectionately known as the Dub. Right? We'll never forget that place. It was one of the best experiences of my life. But prior to that, I was featured on Oprah for my work with African-American males, and the exposure was phenomenal, and that's when I went full-time into the consulting world. And so the BBC in London found out that I was going to go back in on the front lines of this war in education, and they filmed it for a year, and the documentary is called American High School. And so that won the 2016 London Award for Best Documentary on Education, and it was purchased by National Geographic Television and shown in the United States in 2017, primetime, 9 p.m. at night, 4 weeks in a row. And then I was asked to apply for the superintendency of running a district. So successful in the classroom, successful at the school level, and now at the school district level.
Sure.
And then the literacy piece came when I started serving on the board of ILA in 2016. This is my 4th year, and as president-elect, vice president of ILA's board, we're excited about the direction of the association. We do one major annual conference each year. This past year we were in New Orleans. October 15th through the 18th we were in Columbus, Ohio, and locked in on the work that we need to do as a leading authority or agency on literacy in the world globally. Yes.
Impressive track record. I've said that to you on many occasions. And I said I wanted to go into the literacy piece, and I promise that we will. But I was just reflecting on some of your comments that you made and the challenges that you had at the particular high school that you said was transformative as it relates to you and your professional and probably your personal life as well. It reminded me of I think I want to say unconsciously approach students in terms of what they're not connecting or how they're not connecting in the classroom, why they're not absorbing the information, why they even may be acting out in the classroom. And I'm currently serving as interim vice president of student affairs here. And I'm looking at it now from a different lens in terms of the challenges and the experiences that students carry with them on a daily basis from home and how that impacts their performance in the classroom. Speak to those upcoming instructors or those teachers as to how we need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, you know, I wrote the book, Do You Know Enough About Me to Teach Me?
Yes.
And it's subtitled A Student's Perspective. And research for the book led us to 3,000 interviews of young people, grades 3 through 12. And so enlightening in terms of the transparency that young people have and live today. I wouldn't want to be a young person growing up in the world today. It has to be tough. And so we think about the traits and characteristics that they possess, perseverance. They are some of the strongest human beings I know. And so we have to be mindful as educators and parents in terms of that relationship that needs to be created. I think Dr. James Comer at Yale University puts it best, and I had an opportunity early on in my career to study with him for a summer at Yale. And he says that in the absence of a significant relationship, no teaching and learning can take place. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the message we send to those who are pre-service teachers, those who are teaching in the classroom now, and certainly those running schools.
Yes.
That relationship is critical, and that's why there's a 3-step process to teaching and learning, not one. Mm. It's capture, then inspire, then you teach after receiving permission from this strong, bold generation from them to teach them, to engage in that process. Yesterday, we witnessed Marcy Craig Post, who is the executive director of ILA, and I witnessed those relationships in action. We saw one of your professors step out to take a phone call on her personal cell phone from one of her students. Mm. And you could tell it wasn't something that was out of the ordinary, that it was truly ordinary. Mm-hmm. But we must be reminded that we are called to this mission, and it's a mission field in 2020.
I would agree.
And so while we answer the call that's been placed upon our lives to be passionate and involved and engaged in this thing called education, we have teachers like you have professors at Albany State University who understand that calling, and they're answering that call.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good to know. I'm not surprised. And you're right. It's been normalized, which is a good thing. Yeah, we know the intricacies in terms of just dealing with students on a daily basis. But oftentimes we stay on the peripheral and we don't know the deep dive that we do on a daily basis.
And we have to be reminded also that many of our students' backgrounds are not what we experience when we were coming up.
That's right.
But we have to remind them also, as Dr. Pedro Noguera at UCLA, who's a colleague of mine, states that poverty is not a disability, but it can become disabling if ignored.
Sure.
We have to be mindful of the demography of our students and where they come from and what they bring, but we also have to remind them that it's not where you come from, but the focus should be on where you're going, and that we are here to provide that stable foundation of hope for your future. And hope to me stands for helping others pursue education in that realm. And so students are very appreciative of real people. And spending the day on campus yesterday reminded both Marcy and I of the real people that exist within the body of Albany State University.
Yeah. You're right. Students are very astute and can pick up immediately if someone is genuine. And so you may provide the lip service in terms of that you are investing in me, but if I don't have the connection, then the barriers, continue to build. I totally agree. Yeah. Now let's delve into this whole literacy piece. I had an interview, it's probably been about maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and it still sticks with me. Because of our, we walk kind of in silos, if you will, and so we think what happens in our world, happens in other worlds as well. So having said that, I'm an avid reader and have a library in my home, and so I just make the assumption that children and everyone has that level of exposure. Going back to this conversation or this interview that I had, Harriet Hollis, and so she was also local. She's local in the community and works to address literacy challenges. And I remember part of that conversation sharing with me that they were having to educate bus drivers within the community. They had or were forced to because they did a realigning or restructuring of their routes, redesign, if you will. And so Stephen and Wendy, Stephen goes down Route A, Wendy goes down Route B. But when they implemented the new system, Stephen was going down Route Q, Wendy was going down Route M. And they discovered that many of the drivers were illiterate and could not read. But what they did to try to not make it known, if you will, they had started, it took them a while to figure out what was going on, but they had memorized the routes. And so I was always struck by that. And there's clearly a level of intelligence there that you figure out a way to navigate the challenge that you're experiencing. But again, when you think about that, something that we take for granted, the ability to read successfully and, more importantly, comprehend. And so that is not the case. It is still a global, pervasive issue. So what are your thoughts on that, and what does your organization do to counter that?
Well, first of all, we make people aware. Currently, there are 44 million girls that are illiterate in the world.
Staggering.
But here in the United States, that is not the gap that we deal with. It's African American males in the U.S. But we try to, as an association, an organization, educate people, inform people about what happens globally. Some of the issues that we face in the United States, they don't face in Ireland, right? Some of the issues in Switzerland, they don't face in other third world countries. And so it's important for us to have board members who live in these places, right? So that we get a better perspective, a broader scope of what's happening in the world globally. Sure. So ILA prides itself on making sure that we have access and we tap into the brightest minds of literacy in the world. And so we showcase these folks at the annual conference, and people come in. These are researchers. And that's why it's important for me as the incoming president of ILA's board to take on my platform of the partnership of literacy centers at HBCUs in the United States, so that that broad appeal and scope is brought into that landscape.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Yes. So, and although I didn't give you any prep work, I know you will answer this question. Or didn't give you any homework.
That's okay.
So if you had the opportunity to invite 3 people to dinner,
wow,
on an international or national scale, what would you serve, and who would the guest be? And I have to say this, one of the guests has to be an author that you highly respect.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, to answer that question, I couldn't invite the author that I want because they are now deceased.
That's okay if they were, yeah.
Okay. So, wow.
If they were not deceased.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have so many people that it would be, Toni Morrison would be one. A person that I would want at that dinner would be Oprah Winfrey. Having been exposed to her just briefly, I would want to expand my interaction with her.
Okay.
I would have numerous questions of her. And one would be, how do you make billions of dollars and remain so rooted in who you are as a person? I was sharing with some students yesterday that when we were featured on her show, a week later I received a letter from her. The body of the letter was typewritten, but the PS was handwritten. And she wrote the wrong letter under moved, and she just kind of scratched it out and made sure I knew that she knew how to spell moved by putting the O. And I framed it. It sits in my office right now. Somebody who makes billions of dollars and has such a huge impact on the world and people in it is able to be so self-rooted and self-aware. And, you know, one of the things about her that I observed is she is constantly learning and growing. And so that takeaway, I would want more of that. How do I, having had a pretty successful career here in education, how do I continue to challenge myself, to hold myself accountable, to continue to learn and grow?
Yes.
Because when we understand there's a calling placed upon our lives to do certain things, to inspire people, to impact people. There's a huge responsibility that comes with that. To whom much is given, much is required.
Indeed.
And I don't think everybody understands that. The culture that we live in now concerns me, because young people see somebody write a rap lyric with a good hook, and you got $1 million the next day. That means, wow, why do I go to college if I can write a real good hook or put a beat out there and get produced? But I remind them that, you know, the late Nipsey Hussle said, check your circle, because if your circle doesn't inspire you, you don't have a circle, you have a cage. And so we have to make sure that we remain relevant with these young people as well.
I agree.
So what would I serve? I would survey my guests, because I'm always interested in making other people comfortable versus pushing my agenda. So I would find out what those three people like to eat and kind of meet in the middle.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure that will occur, that dinner with Oprah, and so you'll have to promise me that you ask this question. I was thinking as you were commenting about your experience and the amazing letter that you received from her. My takeaway in terms of her making the correction and still making it known, it would have been easy to type it over again. And but to me, that speaks to she always is showcasing how humble she is and that she is human. And not above correction and even self-correction. So certainly impressed with that. My also takeaway was I participate in a weekly conference call just with some women that are also in higher ed, and we do it Friday mornings, early Friday mornings, just to kind of check in with one another. And so it's great for me. We kind of bounce ideas off of one another. And in fact, this morning's conversation was about how power and influence can be so seductive and crippling to a point, because you smell the vapors, if you will, and forget that it is about service, and then you start making it about self and the dangers and perils of that. And so I thought about Oprah, who you have yet to see that, and hope that I don't see that that's just not her makeup. But in many people, that is something that you have to, be conscious of and then fight against, because you can fall victim to it easily. Yeah,
I think the higher you go or climb or are placed, the humbler you should be. I think Oprah has a humble spirit.
Indeed.
And so when you have a humble spirit, you're often reminded when you look yourself in the mirror that you are God's child. And that, of course, He requires us to do the footwork, which we certainly do. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be placed in high places and positions of influence, I don't look at it at all, never have, as power. And I think I do that consciously and subconsciously, because I am a servant leader. I've never... I've always asked people that work with me not to ever refer to me as the person they work for. That makes me cringe to hear somebody say, you know, that's my boss, I work for him. Yes. We work together, we are a team. And so I think when God when He appoints you, He anoints you. And in that anointing is that spirit of humility. It has to be there. Sure. And I think that's why you see often people fall. The fall from grace in places. I mean, there was a story that came out yesterday of a former mayor who wrote a book, and her books were sold in ways that they shouldn't have been. The Baltimore. And, gosh, that's just horrible. It is. Because within the fabric of that person is a story that started somewhere. Yeah. And you know, to hear that story in that way is crippling. And I don't think our young people, though, because of their resilience, they're used to bouncing back and dealing with life and life on its terms, that it's like, you know, it's not going to happen to me. Right. I'm immune to anything happening in and around me, and that's real scary for me. It is. And I think we have a responsibility to, at the core of what's happening in our world, to make them be more conscious of what could happen.
It's a constant conversation
Absolutely.
I have with my two. Hopefully it hasn't fallen on deaf ear. I don't know some days, but I believe in constantly trying to, once you plant the seed, you have to go back and try to nourish it and water it and just remind them that there are immediate and then there are long-term consequences for, the decisions that you make. So you have to be thoughtful and intentional and get into that daily practice. The mayor that you mentioned, my best friend lives in Baltimore, and she works for an organization that the mayor once served on as a board member. Yes. And that was her concern, that all of the good work that she has done,
she did great work,
will be forgotten, or if it is, it will always be that but remember that
the legacy shifts.
There you go. Absolutely. Well said.
We talked yesterday at length and several different times during the course of the day yesterday about the responsibility that our young people have with social media. And Marcy Craig Post and I were able to answer questions which were very intelligent questions from students about social media. When we hire people, even as a superintendent, I will always ask my human resource director whether they checked and vetted social media accounts. And Marcy Craig Post made a great point, in a sense that I was coming from an angle of watch what you post, watch what pictures you post, watch what you say. Also, we pay attention to who your followers are and who you follow.
Your company.
Because we often, 9 times out of 10, become our environment, right? I mean, if you're hanging with folks that do this, there's a larger percentage of a chance that you're going to do it or participate in that kind of behavior. But Marcy made the point that you can also leverage your social media accounts, especially like LinkedIn, to be able to give a future or prospective employer an idea of what you're reading, what your civic responsibility is to you, what your community service is and has been. And so you can use it and leverage it to the positive end as well. And so I think yesterday was powerful in so many ways, and there were multiple takeaways, which will then be able to be scaffolded to present multiple pathways for students.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, one of the many great things that the great Dr. Angela Peters said when she was, we were having conversations, and we were certainly vetting her, and she was interviewing, is she said that I come as a package, and you guys are, you guys indeed make a remarkable team and have had outstanding impact. So,
well, to God be the glory.
Indeed, indeed. So I'm super excited that we are now seeing that to come to fruition as it relates to
I worked
your
harder
role.
yesterday than I've worked in a long time.
We're gonna have to talk to her about that.
For free.
Let up. I was joking one day, we were talking about a speaking engagement. She's like, oh, you have to worry about a fee.
Oh, wow.
So.
Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Now the rest of the world knows. But I love that you all are, have the level of support that you all provide one another and just complement each other so well.
Well, there's no way I could do my work without her support. And she's not only highly intelligent, but she's a very humble person who never shares her story. And so I think, again, she's God sent to not only me as her husband, but to our whole family, as a mother and sister and daughter and grandmother. Our family adores her. My father's 95 years old and told me the first time he met her, boy, you better keep her.
Oh, beautiful.
And so I've always listened to my father, and I'm glad I did.
Wise man. Wise men.
No
wise men. I'm glad you listened to him too.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, know that you are always welcome back to come on the show. I look forward to, in terms of your continued contributions and support and guidance of Albany State University. I know you will do well in this upcoming role.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm excited, again, for your continued impact on the world of literacy. It is certainly needed. You left me with some more sobering statistics. I did not know those numbers. And so we'll have to continue to do our part to shift that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yes.
My pleasure. Viewers, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I will see you next time.